Tell me, Shitarakshi, when we're ready to start, so then we'll start.
Yes, sir, we can start.
Can we?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. It's already 6 and 2 minutes. Okay, so fine. Thank you. Friends and colleagues, it's my privilege to welcome you to the 118th webinar of INHAF's series on Rethinking City. This one is the third on the subject on strengthening municipal finances in India. And today's panel of experts will discuss institutional design to streamline municipal finances. So today is institutional part. Two earlier editions discussed the municipal revenue, and the last one we looked at municipal expenditure. Now, let me tell you that this has been quite an engaging series, and overall response has been very, extremely positive. In fact, I'm very delighted it's going so well. Before I introduce the purpose and rationale for the webinar series that we have been running for almost 3 years now, let me first thank the distinguished individuals who constitute the panel today. Sarthak Pradhan ji, who is a public finance researcher at Takshila Institute, is the brain behind this webinar series and has been a very thoughtful anchor. Thanks, Sarthak ji, for your time, effort, and contribution. I really mean it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirti ji, for the opportunity.
We're also thankful to Shri Vikram Kapur Saab. He's an IAS officer in the Tamil Nadu cadre and is currently director at Anna Administrative Staff College, Chennai, and also Director General of Training. He has handled Chennai Municipal Corporation as Municipal Commissioner and also was Chief of CMDA. And though he's very busy, he has kindly accepted our very late invitation. So thank you, Vikram Saab. You've been very kind in accepting this. Let me also thank Sri Srinivas Alavilli, a fellow at World Resource Institute, and Dr. Mercy Samuel, a senior associate professor at SAPT University. When I studied there, it was not a university, it was just a School of Architecture. So thank Mercy ji. Also, I have very little doubt that this distinguished panel will make the event very rich in content. Before I hand this over to Sarthak ji to conduct the session, I need to take a few minutes of your time to tell you why we have been running this webinar series for so long and why have we reached and how we have reached today to the 118th edition of the series. As you know, the title of the webinar series is the Rethinking City. And its dominant message is that the time has come to change and change radically the ways we see, plan, develop, finance, manage, and govern our cities. The new slogans that we have coined are not only attractive, they're also demanding. It's an 8-theme slogan economically productive, socially just, politically participatory, culturally vibrant, environmentally sustainable, ecologically sensitive, technologically adaptive, and people-centric cities. So there's 8. I'm not going to tell you whole story how we did this, but it is something I enjoyed talking about all the time. If that is the need and aspiration, let me tell you what the reality is. And this is the aspiration if we are talking about sustainable cities, we're talking about people-centric cities, we're talking about economically productive cities. Let us hear what the latest issue of Economics is saying. It's a very highly respected magazine. Someone, I think as a matter of fact, someone sent it from SEP to me the day before, and I thought I'll share this with you. This is what the Economist says. It says, Indian cities are utterly unprepared for what is about to hit them. The urban population is set to double by 2050. And India is far from ready. No one knows how many people live in its cities today. The last census was taken 13 years ago. The central government shows no sign of conducting a fresh one. The census definition of an urban area is narrow, but even by strict standard, 1 in 3 people lived in cities in 2011. Today, perhaps as many as 1 in 2 live in cities. One thing is clear. The hundreds of millions of urban Indians will soon be joined by hundreds of millions more. Yet, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs was allocated a mere 1.7% of national budget announced on July 23rd. I just quoted you from the Economist of the last week. And I'm saying if that is what the economics says, this is what we have been saying for the last 3 years as we conducted the series. And these are few things that I wanted to say. What have we been saying? We're saying, despite being engines of growth and centers of culture, technology, and global attention and investment, our cities are not in pink of health. Be that small or big, industrial or commercial, district town or state capital. And whether the problem area is environment or water or governance or planning or slums or housing. In short, our cities are saddled with major challenges. This is the first thing we've been saying. Second thing we are saying is that the cities, as they are, and the way they grow and develop, do not look like meeting the challenge of unprecedented urbanization India is witnessing. Issue is not that we have a problem. Issue is we are not showing signs that we are equipped to handle the challenge. It neither looks like providing safe and healthy quality of life to 870 million people who will be there in cities in 27 more years, nor does it look like delivering on 7 to 8% economic growth the country expects to get rid of its poverty and become as economic power. That's the second thing we've been saying, that doesn't look equipped. The third thing we are saying is this. The government effort alone is not adequate to ensure healthy, livable, productive, inclusive, and sustainable cities. The government alone cannot do it. And that I must immediately add, not that JNNURM, Smart City, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the sanitation project, Atal Mission in infrastructure, and other such projects. It doesn't mean that they are not very important. They are very important. They're all useful and serving their purpose, but do not look adequate when you see them in the context of the daunting urban challenge in its totality. So these projects are there. They're serving the purpose. But when you look holistically, they do not seem to kind of add up. The fourth thing, which is the heart of this webinar series, the wider society, the human capital outside the government system has the required skills, knowledge, experience, and even motivation to contribute meaningfully in search for alternative approaches and new solutions. And this webinar series is part of a wider national societal effort aimed to bring in not only fresh ideas and new perspectives, but also new voices, new collectivism, new togetherness, new partnership, and new energy in articulating the need for and ways to rethinking our cities, both redefining the urban challenge and finding more effective ways to addressing it. So this particular effort we're doing for last 3 years is for this purpose. It is taking the urban challenge to people. It is preparing them to engage and contribute. And it is to create that environment in which we start looking for adequate response to the challenge. That is the whole purpose for which we are doing it. And with that longish introduction, Sarthak Saab, over to you. Please conduct the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirtiji, for the introduction to the series and for introducing the panelists for today's session. Good evening, everyone. I am Sarthak, Assistant Professor at the Takshashila Institution, an independent center for research and education in public policy. I welcome you all to this webinar series, webinar on reimagining institutional design to streamline municipal finance. I welcome the panelists, Dr. Mercy, Mr. Srinivas, Mr. Vikram. And again, you can see there is an interesting set of panelists that we have today, right? People from academia, people who have been policy practitioners, and also we have representation from the civic society. Kirtiji has beautifully set today's context, the context for today's discussion. I will just like to add a couple of things. This is the third webinar in the series. In the first two webinars, we tried to take stock of the municipal finance position. In the first webinar, we looked at the revenue stream of municipal bodies, how they face different kinds of difficulties in accessing resources. And in some cases, they have some of these avenues, but they're not properly leveraged. For instance, user charges are not properly leveraged in most of the municipal bodies. In the second session, we looked at the expenditure responsibilities of municipal bodies, how well they are performing these responsibilities. Should some of these responsibilities be reevaluated? Are there any accountability mechanism in place? Today's session tries to bring together what we have been discussing in the past. It kind of connects some of the threads. So what we're going to do today is we are going to look at the role of various institutions in facilitating municipal finances. Specifically, we will be looking at the different kinds of incentives in these institutions. Are these incentives well aligned? In which scenarios they are not aligned? What type of incentives we need to create, maybe? What kind of perverse incentives, if there exists any, needs to be removed. So we'll try to focus on the political economy lens as well, so that it can help us bring in some change, right? So we can move from whatever is the current level of equilibrium, which Kirti ji very nicely pointed out, the Economist the findings in the Economist article. So how do we move from that situation to a better situation? Now, when it comes to the structure, the first 90 minutes or so, we will dedicate on discussing some important questions, and then we will open the house for discussion. So with this, let's get started. Now, first thing, and for the first few questions, revolves around the role of the State Finance Commission. I'll go to all the panelists, Dr. Mercy, Mr. Srinivas, Mr. Vikram. Now, the first thing that I had in mind was the states. I want to look at the states, their responsibilities. Ideally, states should be constituting the State Finance Commission as required, right? Every 5 years, the State Finance Commission should be constituted by the states. But that has not been the case. Some states, they have constituted the State Finance Commissions at regular intervals. The 6th State Finance Commission recommendations they're following, but that is not the case with all the states. Very few states have actually constituted all these State Finance Commissions on time. And not only the constitution of these bodies, the reports that are prepared by these bodies, many times these recommendations are not submitted on time. There is delay. The action taken report, that there is a delay in that as well. Now, if I have to compare this with what happens at the union level, right? The Union Finance Commission is constituted regularly. Its recommendations, again, are generally accepted by the union government. So what explains this divergence? At the union level, most likely the things are moving smoothly. In fact, right now the 16th Finance Commission has been constituted, and again, different states are pitching their proposals. There is a lot of discussion in the media. But when it comes to the State Finance Commission, we see some of these divergence. What explains this divergence? Now, I want to go to the panelists, and I want specific perspectives here. For instance, Dr. Mercy and Mr. Vikram, could you give us that perspective from the lens of an academic, a researcher, and from the lens of a policy practitioner? Right? Is there any inherent flaw in the design which prevents the states from constituting the State Finance Commissions at regular intervals? Is there any political economy factor at play? And Mr. Srinivas, I just want to know why there is not much discussion around this. In fact, for Karnataka, for instance, right, the 4th State Finance Commission, it submitted its report with a 2 years delay, right? And it's not just the case with Karnataka. Many other states have been guilty of that. So what explains this? The role of states here, why they have not been serious, I would say, with some of these things. Dr. Mercy, then Mr. Vikram, then Mr. Srinivas.
Thank you, Sarthak. So, very rightly put, actually, our researchers and studies have said that, and all of us, we know that the urban awakening came very late to India. So, wherein the central finance commissions were constituted since the beginning, but the element of urban came only since 1993 when the 74th Amendment came into play. So that awakening came very late about states having a finance commission where they would guide the urban local bodies about how the funds need to be distributed between the state and the local body. And the problem is that because the states were not in that position previously, they were not thinking on those lines. So now suddenly they were asked to think on those lines, that there is an entity wherein you will have to share the funds and you will have to, clearly spell it out that how much of it is that is the local bodies are empowered to do. So they found some level of power being taken away from them. And that is why most of the states, though they have accepted that we will come up with the state finance commissions, most of the states are very slow in coming up with the state finance commission. The commissions are not constituted, like there are only 9 states in amongst the 28 states in India where the state finance commission is constituted. Like in Gujarat, we have only the 3rd Finance Commission. And if we go and ask them, where is the report of the 3rd Finance Commission? Trust me, nobody knows where that file is and where that report is. right? So we cannot even access that document. It is not available as such to read what were the recommendations. And more so, there has to be an action taken report when a finance commission is set up and the recommendations are made. So the action taken reports also put up some level of responsibility on the government that what actions they have taken based on the recommendations, and if they haven't taken actions on some recommendations, then what are the reasons. So to come out in black and white with those reasons, the state found that it is not a very good practice to dilute our powers to the urban local bodies and create that sense of understanding amongst the people also that there is a third layer of entity called the city governments, which need to be recognized. So because the evolution was very delayed, so the practice started of a very different nature, and suddenly a change was mandated by the 74th Amendment, which was not very well accepted by the states. And the way the 74th Amendment is also worded is very ambiguous. So we call it as a birth defect of the 74th Constitution, because it is all written in very abstract form, that may, could, would, should. So squarely it puts up the whole management of the urban local bodies in the laps of the state government. So the state government has to take care of it, whichever, however way they want to do it. They still are the ones who are responsible for the city governments, and they have to take the decisions. So they feel that we can take the decisions and not empower the cities to take those decisions for themselves. And that is why we can see so much of taxes also. If the city has to raise, it has to go and get the approval of the state government. If they have to come up with a municipal bond, they have to go and get an approval from the state government. So the level of dependency is slowly it increased. And now the market is demanding a different route altogether because of the rapid urbanization and the kind of densification and agglomeration that is happening. The market is demanding a different state of action that the governments should be taking.
Thank you, Dr. Mercy. Mr. Kapur?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, my thanks to Mr. Kirti Shah for inviting me for the seminar, and pleasure to be here on the panel with other co-panelists. Mr. Sarthak, I saw your note, and I think this question really is very important as to why the SFCs that were set up after the 74th Amendment, they have not been regularly giving their reports. In fact, they have not been set up in time, and you've given these a very good explanation. I agree with Dr. Mercy that initially the states have been reluctant to share power with the urban local bodies, and therefore being a new kind of an initiative, obviously it takes some time. But then we've been having this particular amendment for now more than 2 decades, 3 decades nearly, and therefore it's very imperative that the states now take the recommendations seriously. First of all, they need to constitute the SFCs. It's an open secret that states are not very comfortable in handing over their powers or their finances to urban local bodies. And as Dr. Mercy has pointed out, they still feel they are accountable for municipal governance. And therefore, they're saying, when we are spending so much on, the urban areas, and we are providing so much of support, why should there be a compulsion on us to have this State Finance Commission to further kind of dilute our powers? So there is always this thing that in the 3 tiers of governance, at the union, at the state, and at the local body level, it's a fact that states are now really having all the power. The ULBs are virtually dependent on the states, because even the Constitution says that the laws which will govern the devolution which is to be done through the SFCs will be written by the states. So in a way, the local bodies are totally dependent. They are in no position to demand it. Second, why this is happening? Because our urban local bodies are too dissipated. Every state is having hundreds of local bodies, and sometimes you see them being superseded. In certain states, elections even have not been held. But this is never the case with state governments. State governments, they run their tenure. Even if tenure is cut short, elections happen, and immediately there is a successor political government which takes over. So there is continuity, and the states, they demand their right. So even you imagine a situation where if the Central Finance Commission is not set up or its report is not submitted in time, all hell will break loose. States will really take the central government, to the cleaners. But do you think the similar situation will happen if the state does not constitute an SFC or the SFC doesn't give the report? The urban local bodies have no, I would say they have very little that kind of a strength, either in numbers or in terms of their influence, to actually force state governments to, comply with the constitution and set up the SFCs once in 5 years, or to give the action taken reports, etc. So I think it's a very unequal battle. ULBs, we can't reasonably expect them to become all of a sudden so demanding that they will compel their respective state governments to, comply with it. So this, I think, would explain the disparity. I'll take a minute to also give some suggestions as to what measures can be taken to basically compel the states to act more responsibly in this regard. One could be that the Central Finance Commissions can make some of its grants conditional upon the SFC's reports having been submitted in time, of devolution having been carried out, of action taken reports having been submitted. So the way central government in several of its schemes, makes it mandatory for certain reforms to take place. So a lot of either central government schemes or at least the Central Finance Commission's conditional grants can have very stringent conditions which can penalize states that do not set up the SFCs, or if the SFCs don't give the reports in time. I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vikram. I have also one suggestion. I'll come to that. But before that, Mr. Srinivas.
Thank you, Sarthak. It's indeed a pleasure and privilege to be on this panel with such accomplished professionals, Mr. Vikram and Dr. Mercy. I'm not an expert on the subject, though I have a lot of opinions on it. And as a civic activist and a civil society participant, please look at my comments and inputs, from that lens and not from a professional academic lens. I think, Sarthak, the fundamental, the elephant in the room is the political economy. It has already been alluded upon by both Dr. Mercy and Mr. Vikram. The political economy doesn't allow for the cities to thrive on their own. It's like the old saying when people say, right, everyone wants a Bhagat Singh to be born, but in the neighbor's house, not in my house, right? Everyone wants a Gandhi, but in the neighbor's house. Similarly, everyone wants federalism, but only up to their level, not the level below that. So states want federalism, states want more share of the funds from center, but they won't do that to the urban local bodies or even rural local bodies below them. For them, that will be like a major problem, right? Like Mr. Vikram has said, if the Union Central Finance Commission delayed or does something that is not acceptable to states, you will see a huge uproar. It will become a national topic and it will be discussed in every state legislature, and all of that will happen. But the state finance commissions have been sleeping or non-functional for 20 years now, and yet most people have never heard the word state finance commission. When you say SFC, people think it is like KFC or something else. They don't really realize that it's a very important body that has actually a lot of meaning to the cities and rural bodies of the country. And people in the development sector where I work now, and many of them have never heard that word SFC. So everyone has heard of the FC grants, FC this, FC that, right? All of that is, so in the parlance itself, it is not there. So the whole thing is around political economy. I think the political economy is really afraid of sharing power. I think it's no open secret, as to quote Mr. Vikram, who is in the government, it's no open secret the people at the state don't want to share their powers with the thing. It's a fear, it's an insecurity. You call it what you want, but that is what it drives it. The way in which our elections happen, enormous amounts of money are spent in the elections. To become an MLA, someone has to spend 10 crores, 15 crores, and so on, depending on which state you are. These numbers can reach up to 100 crores, depending on what we hear. So when things like that happen, automatically the recovery of that investment has to happen. And for that to happen, having less number of decision makers at urban level is very important. Therefore, there is a intentional, what you call lessening of the powers of the municipal corporation that happens, because all the money is in the municipal corporation. The real estate is there, and the political economy heavily depends on the land. So if you want to go into the really root of the problem, this is the problem, because the people who is supposed to give powers to SFC or give powers to ULBs, the state legislature. The center has nothing to do with it. There is nothing that the union government needs to do in this regard. This urban governance is entirely a state subject. Every state has a municipal act. We keep hiding behind 74th Amendment Act. I would say forget about 74th Amendment Act. Don't even mention it. It came, it went, it's done. Obviously, it failed spectacularly that it didn't make any big difference. Therefore, if we keep referring to 74th Amendment, we are not going to move the ball forward. What we should instead focus on is, what is the Tamil Nadu Municipal Act? What is the Karnataka Municipal Act? What is the Haryana Municipal Act? Because the state acts are going to determine what happens in the state. Working with a particular state government and trying to reform the urban governance within the state is far more valuable than trying to worry about what happens in Delhi, right? This is the principle of subsidiarity, as many of us also understand it, right? The problems of the city can only be solved by the city. The programs like Swachh Bharat and smart cities and so on, they may look nice on paper, but they don't really work. And if we don't really mince words, we can say that how can someone sitting in Delhi worry about toilets in Bengaluru Municipal Corporation or Davangere Municipal Corporation? It just doesn't even make any sense. If you are giving funds for it, then how are you going to monitor it? And we all know what happened with the smart cities. No offense, it's a well-intentioned plan, but the farther away you are from the place where things are going to be implemented, the more difficult it is going to be for you to make sense of that program. Therefore, I would rather have the MOHUA or the Finance Commission transfer those funds to the cities rather than run programs running from Delhi. That's a fundamental thing that we all have to agree on. And if we don't agree on it, we should discuss why. Another way of doing it is, if there is a fund coming in from a union government, the union government should say each city should have 300 buses per lakh of population. That is what these funds can be used for. So there is a specific condition for which these funds can be used, and that kind of metrics can be put forward in case you are transferring funds in the short term. The real solution is SFC, as you rightly identified. And to get SFC, the political economy is the problem. You need to convince the CM, the cabinet, the MLAs. The MLAs want to sit in the state assembly, but want to act like corporators. We call them super corporators, particularly in big cities. In a city like Bengaluru, we have 28 MLAs. Pretty much all the MLAs operate like municipal corporators. You can go to them for road, pothole, water, any of those things. But if you go to them for a state level legislation, you may not get a response, or they may not participate in such a response. So the role of legislators at a state level is deteriorated over the years. We no longer have meaningful discussions in the state assembly. If we did, then SFC will be a biggest topic in the state legislature also. So all parties are in the same boat. So therefore, we can't expect something like this to happen. When there's an urban rejuvenation, when a lot of citizens in the urban areas come together and demand SFC, then things will change. Today, what they're demanding, better quality of life, better roads, better water, no flooding, climate change. These are the things that people are demanding. Demanding institutional reforms from civil society, expecting the demand, will be a little premature at this point. Because like I said, people don't even know the institutional mechanisms. Yeah. And when people say government, they don't know which government they mean. They don't realize that there are 3 tiers of government. And then there's a 3rd tier of government called the city government, which is actually called urban local body. First and foremost, we should fix that nomenclature. How can you say something is a government if you call it an urban local body? So you need to bring in the change of nomenclature, call it city government. And that can be done at a state level legislation. Once it becomes a government, it can do taxation, it can make bylaws, it can do a lot of things. It can borrow funds. Surely it can take permission to borrow funds. The same with states, right? States have to go to center for a certain amount of borrowing and so on, municipal bonds and so on. So many of these things need to be done.
Okay.
But I think the fundamental is about the state level reform and the urban, law reform at an individual state level, move beyond the central laws and central government.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Srinivas. And it is an interesting framing, city governments. So to Mr. Kapur's point, right, that there is a massive power asymmetry that exists between the states and in the state union dynamics. The states tend to have some power, but when it comes to the state and urban local bodies, that dynamics, urban local bodies don't seem to have that kind of a power. Now, one thought experiment here. If, let's say, there is some way by which the urban local bodies organize themselves and they demand things, right, at the state level, is it something that is feasible? Is it something that can possibly change things? Can there be? It's for Mr. Kapur and Mr. Srinivas also. You can also take it up.
I'll let sir respond.
Yeah, theoretically, yes. I mean, if urban local bodies are able to get their act together and apply pressure, I'm sure states will be more sensitive to that. But how they will, get together and find that voice is a moot point.
One issue I see is the number is quite huge, and when the number is huge, then that coming together becomes slightly difficult. When it is states, you have again 20 limited number of states, right? So it is easier. 20 odd states, yeah.
So it's not just number, Mr. Sarthak. It's also an asymmetry in the local bodies themselves. You have these mega policies on one extreme, and then you go down. You have these what we call nagar panchayats or town panchayats in Tamil Nadu, and their I think voice is so less compared to these municipal corporations and big. So it's a huge spectrum. The size of these local bodies is so huge that there also you can't have a uniform kind of a voice, and each one of them kind of
interests will also be different.
Interests are different, priorities are different, and their voice would be different. Politically also, some of them may be stronger and some may be weaker. So getting this disparate group of urban local bodies, just because you've all clubbed them into a set of urban, doesn't make them all of a sudden equal or having similar voice. A lot of these nagar panchayats, for example, would actually classify as villages.
Yeah,
and their requirements and their level of expectations are much smaller compared to these mega cities and all. So first you have to address that issue also, this asymmetry within.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, Sarthak, on a lighter note, I think urban local bodies should probably rename themselves as rural local bodies, because rural seem to have more political power in our country. Right? The 73rd has been devolved much better, and the rural bodies actually receive more funds and more financially autonomous. There is Gram Sabha and so many other ways. So in some sense, by calling them urban, we have done a disservice to this. Sometimes this thought occurs to me. But on a more serious note, what Vikram sir said is absolutely what I believe in. It's a political power of the urban local bodies. When you say urban local bodies can get together and make a demand, what exactly do you mean? Who is the urban local bodies? Is it the big municipal corporations like Chennai, Bengaluru, Hyderabad? Or is it the smaller municipal councils or the town panchayats which are voiceless, right? And remember that the people that will speak on behalf of the cities have to be the political leadership of the cities. It's not going to be the bureaucratic leadership of the cities who are not going to make demands. It's not their duty. We cannot expect officials to make these demands coming together, and that will be a revolution if that happens. It's not going to happen. But what is going to happen is the mayors of all these cities and the councillors and chairpersons can come together. But guess what? Half of these cities don't even have elections. I am speaking to you all from Bengaluru, and the last election we had is 9 years ago in 2015. For the last 4 years, the greatest city of India, Bengaluru, does not have a mayor, does not have a council, does not have ward councillors. It is entirely run by the state government. Mumbai had the same situation. Mumbai still doesn't have an elected council and mayor. Delhi did not have for many years. Chennai did not have a mayor for 7, 8 years until recently when elections was held. So the solving the SFC is a much smaller problem than holding elections for the municipalities and giving powers to the municipalities. So it's a first order problem. I thought we are not getting into that in this conversation, but if you did that, then you did that. And even if you did that, the mayors have no powers, the councillors have no powers. In one of the studies that I've led during my stint in Janagraha was Councillor Leadership Development Program. Dr. Mercy was also involved in it. You know, we have 543 MPs in this country, 4,200 MLAs in this country, all states combined, but 87,400 municipal councillors in this city. Now, if you add only the urban cities, corporations, and all of that, not counting the rural, 87,000 councillors. Now, 87,000 political leaders is a very strong force in this country. Now, if they come together and they demand things either within the state level or at a national level, it will make a huge difference. But they will never come together because you never know who the councillor is and there is no program that unites them. In Karnataka, there have been attempts to conduct training sessions. In Kerala, does a great job of empowering councillors. Tamil Nadu, where we've conducted some programs with the Coimbatore Municipal Corporation and several municipal corporations on the councillor leadership. So if we develop the political capabilities and capacities of the councillors, and then becoming a municipal councillor becomes a political ambition, and that's how political power is obtained. And some of the greatest leaders of this country, from Jawaharlal Nehru to Vallabhbhai Patel to Subhash Chandra Bose, and including recent leaders, Mr. Devendra Fadnavis, who is currently the Deputy Chief Minister in Maharashtra, they all started as Honorable President Draupadi Murmu. All of them were councillors. They were councillors in their first elected role. And if they get the political powers, they get together, what you said will happen within a year. That's my guess.
Yeah.
But that never happens.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Srinivas. But yeah, but I still have some questions related to the state finance commissions, apart from the other things, other discussion points that we have. So one is looking at it from the perspective of the states. Another is looking at state finance commissions as institutions itself, because again, they do have some significant role to play, right? When it comes to devolution of funds to the urban local bodies. Now, I have two, again, related questions. One is purely from the institutional perspective, that, again, one thing is, yeah, state finance commissions are not timely formed, but whenever state finance commissions are formed, it has been observed by multiple committees that the recommendations that they provide for, they are generally not on the basis of sound public finance principles. Many times these recommendations are ad hoc. And again, many times they will not follow different kind of standardized formats, right? For instance, classification of revenues into different streams. So these are some of the things that we find with the State Finance Commission reports. In case we are able to find it, as Dr. Mercy was saying, in some cases you can't even find the reports. So what explains, right, the limited capacity of the state finance commissions, right? Why this thing is there, right? Why they don't follow maybe the sound finance, public finance principles. The second thing is the recommendations by these state finance commissions across states. There seems to be divergence, right? For instance, I'm just quoting some data points here. When it comes to the state of Karnataka, Kerala, the amount devolved as per the recommendation of the State Finance Commission in the past was somewhere around 6,000 rupees per capita, 3,000 rupees per capita. And for the same duration, 2015-2019, the amount devolved average, all states combined together, was around some 1,000 rupees, right? So Karnataka devolved some 6 times the amount, Kerala devolved around 3 times the amount, the average amount. So what explains this particular divergence, right? On what basis they are giving these recommendations? What could be the reason why there is this difference, right? Is it some socio-cultural factor? Is it history? Is it path dependence? Or is it maybe, as Mr. Srinivas was talking about, citizens need to demand? In some places, maybe the citizens are demanding, they have more awareness, as a result of which it is getting translated into higher devolution to the urban local bodies. So two things. What explains the divergence? You can talk about it after we discuss about the institutional capacities of the state finance commissions. Dr. Mercy, then Mr. Vikram, then Mr. Srinivas.
Yeah, so Sarthak, so when you said that, I was thinking that hypothetically, if I am put up in the Committee for State Finance Commission, so how would it go? So it all starts with a lot of data that needs to be available, even in the hands of the committee, to start looking at it from different lens and then putting it up in some organized fashion to do some analysis and then coming out with some, very targeted recommendations. So recently we were working with one of the state governments for the city finance ranking, and the state wanted most of their cities to participate in that. And ironically, as Vikramji had said, that there are different types of cities. So, there was no way that we could standardize certain figures across cities and say, ki, this will come under this particular head. So because the state never had a municipal accounting manual, neither did they follow the National Municipal Accounting Manual, nor did they had a state municipal accounting manual. So everybody was doing the accounting ad hoc in their own ways and mechanisms, and what should fall where. Nobody knows what is included in that figure. Nobody knows. So it was a very big task for the state government and other people involved as stakeholders to actually put down that data into some sensible information and then filled up the content into the dashboard for the city finance ranking. So I was wondering that sitting in the state, there are so many urban local bodies, as Vikramji had said, and so many different types of urban local bodies, and all the data is so dissipated, hung around. You don't know what kind of information you are asking and what is being provided to you, and then how do you decode all of it to make some sense. So even when the state finance commissions are there, they work on very randomized data that is provided to them. So the information that is going as an input is also very randomized, which is very difficult to make sense out of that particular data that is given to them. And that is why the recommendations sometimes are not very appropriate, very ambiguous. They are in various different directions. They don't make sense to the state government also. So that is one thing, that the data accounting and the data classification methodologies are absolutely missing from the states. Even the progressive states also don't have a proper data culture within their cities. So, how do you make sense of from where to start and where to reach? You don't know what is the beginning point of each different kinds of local bodies in the state. So that is one of the very difficult challenge for the committee members even in the State Finance Commission. Then there is also that what is the composition of the State Finance Commission? Who all are involved? Are there economists, ample number of economists there? Or is it put up as an additional charge to a bureaucrat that along with other assignments, you need to look at this also? So how the composition of the State Finance Commission as a committee is decided has also got a lot to do with what kind of recommendations and how much in-depth and valid recommendations are coming forward.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Mashi. Mr. Kapur?
So I don't have any direct experience of working in a finance commission, but I have read the reports of the past few state finance commissions. I agree with Dr. Mercy that invariably the chairman and members would be either serving or retired bureaucrats who may not have also had similar experience in the past. But normally we find that the team that works with the finance commission and sometimes even a member is somebody who has past experience. So a lot of them rely on the earlier Finance Commission reports and kind of it's kind of a template which they use, for their further reports. To be very fair to at least Tamil Nadu, I think the quality of the report is not much of an issue. Maybe in other states, it may be an issue. They take a lot of learning from the CFC reports. Of course, they are much more elaborate and they cover a much bigger canvas. But the State Finance Commission reports are fairly pointed. At some point during this webinar, I will come to an issue relating to the whole methodology of writing a State Finance Commission report and its recommendations. But whatever reports that are being given right now, we don't have much of an issue on data, at least in Tamil Nadu. Our systems are pretty robust. Our accounting standards are fairly uniform. And although it takes time sometimes to collect and collate the data, but we do get the data. Some bit of extrapolation does happen all the time, but it's not a major issue. But yes, I believe some states do have that problem. But what I would like to say is that you will in the system normally have some experts who have experience of the past, and then they bring it to bear on the report, and invariably we do end up with reasonably well-written reports. So I don't have experience of other states' SFC reports. Maybe Srinivas would like to come on that, please.
Sure. It's a very interesting observation you made. I think the mileage of urban SFCs vary based on the mileage of the urban governance journey in the state, right? Different states have had different journeys. Tamil Nadu is the most urbanized state at this moment, right? The number of urban centers in Tamil Nadu is higher than any other state. Therefore, they have much more robust systems, much more, well-matured accounting systems and all of that kind of stuff. Kerala, we all know about Kudumbashree and what happened in Kerala 30, 40 years ago. So they're way ahead of that. Karnataka, the state, my state, is a role model for decentralization from the 70s, right? From Mr. Devraj to even prior to independence, the Mysore Kingdom days and all of that. Karnataka is a role model for decentralization. Therefore, there's certain understanding of what needs to be done at what level and all of that. So the Karnataka Municipal Act, KMC Act, is 1976. It is decades before the 74th Amendment, for example. Same with the 73rd Amendment. So the maturity of those legislations, those processes and the governance models has a lot to do with what happens in the SFC also. Because the SFC, when it sits down to make recommendations or make plans, it really depends on the information provided by the various local governments. If the information is not consistent, it is not in a certain format, it is not able to compare and contrast, then what's it going to do? Having said, that's why you'll see more allocations from Karnataka and a better functioning of the SFCs from, say, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. And I've heard from my colleagues in Janagraha and others say that West Bengal has really good SFC or, better models. Haryana seems to be doing well. So there are bright stars here and there. So I'm not an expert in all SFCs of all states, so I wouldn't dare to comment on it. But if you think about it, Sarthak, what is really missing here is when we talk about 16th Finance Commission, everybody knows that Mr. Arvind Pangaria is the chairperson of the 16th Finance. Everybody, in the sense, people that want to know, that are in this field of urban development or whatever, governance and all that. Nobody knows who is the SFC. Just like everybody knows when is the union budget made. People even know that there is a halwa ceremony before the budget is prepared. People know that the state budget is presented, but nobody knows when the city budget is made, how much it is, what is involved in it, what will happen as a result of city budget. So we have a lack of asymmetry of information. People are not clear on this. And how a city makes a budget, there isn't a standard format for it. So there's a lot of work being done to standardize these things. So wonderful work by Janagraha, my earlier organization, and I'm sure many of you are aware of it. And I think you had them in the earlier sessions that you had. So City Finance has been a great portalization of all the finance of city and all of that. But what I think is that the fundamental reason why we don't have consistent formats is autonomy, right? The Central Finance Commission reports to the President of India. Doesn't report to the Prime Minister of India. The Finance Commission is an autonomous body, like the Election Commission, whereas the State Finance Commission is completely under the thumb of the state government. So huge difference on what their job is and what the terms of reference are. So much debate on terms of reference for the 16th Finance Commission, right? And that phrase terms of reference is not even used in a State Finance Commission sphere. We don't know when they meet, where they meet, who they are taking inputs from, right? How do you measure? In this many 16 finance commissions have now happened. In states, maybe there are 5 or 6. Fair enough, it's a relatively new thing. But the Central Finance Commission has evolved so many paradigms. How do you measure development of a state to another state? What are the development indices? Why should you give certain amount of money to so-called backward states? You know, all of that kind of thing. These parameters have already been developed. Union Central Finance Commission doesn't operate in void. Everything that Central Finance Commission does comes from the states themselves. They visit almost every state. So it is very hard for me to accept that we don't have information. We do have the information. Maybe the political will to use that information for the SFC is lack. That's where I come from. And when you look at gaps, the rural, it's very easy to understand that. In urban, how do you measure where a certain city is compared to another city? Is it the number of buses? Is it the amount of rainfall? Incidents of flooding? Is it the amount of waste generated? These metrics are not very hard. All of us know what these urban metrics are for a city. If the State Finance Commission start measuring these metrics and insist on presenting this data, that's how you can standardize the recommendations. And another point, which is a little counter to what I just said, is that I don't think all State Finance Commission need to follow the exact same model. There are hilly states, there are plain states, there is industrialized states like Maharashtra and Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. There are tourism-based states like Goa. So they might have different priorities and different, that is the whole purpose of federalism and fiscal federalism, right? Goa might want to improve the tourism and ecology and all of that, whereas Karnataka might want to do something else and Tamil Nadu might want to focus on something else. So I'm not very keen that all SFCs must have the straight jacket, this is the approach and all of that. But at least at a metrics level, understanding where cities stand, there should be standardization of that. And that's the role central government can play. Central government's role in urban is standardizing on the matrices. How do you measure the current status of a city? That is a role that MOHUA and central government can play more than anyone else.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Srinivas. In fact, I was going to the union government's role. In fact, that is the next section that we want to talk about. But before that, just a couple of things. For instance, Mr. Srinivas, you mentioned that in case of Karnataka, we have had a long history of decentralization, right? 1970s, you also already had a legislation. And again, this is something which might be showing results. It would have shown results back then, and it also leads to higher devolution to urban local bodies. Now, is there any way by which this template can be replicated somewhere else, or is it completely path dependence, right? Something has happened in the past and it continues. Other states, it's not the case. The average is 1,000. That means other places, the devolution amount is even less than that. So what can be done to possibly replicate this, or is it just not replicable?
I assume the need for replication itself, right? By replication, what you mean is that collaboration between states, right? So some other Madhya Pradesh should visit Karnataka and say that, okay, how are you guys doing this SFC? What happened as a result of it? Let's learn from it. We know from experience, this kind of best practices repetition does not happen very much in India. It does happen here and there. The women's self-help groups is a great example of policies being traveling from one state to another state. But at this level, I think it's very difficult. And the other point that occurs to me, and maybe they are replicable, and maybe Mr. Vikram can comment on it. But what I would say is that there is a certain level of learning that each state needs to have. The state of India, the city of Bengaluru, Sarthak, is 1.4 crore population right now. Okay, we didn't have a census, so nobody knows officially, but everyone accepts in the city that our population is about 14 million right now, which is nearly 3 times that of Singapore. If Bengaluru was a country, it would be world's 65th most largest countries in the world. So now imagine the states of India. Karnataka would be one of the biggest countries in the world. So I would say that the intelligentsia, the civil society, the policy making community of the states need to figure out how they want their urban governance, how they want their SFCs. And in that process, if they look up Kerala or Tamil Nadu or Karnataka as role models, let that happen. But trying to apply a similar yardstick across SFC of a state, I don't know who will lead that, who will drive that. Does the interstate council led by the Honorable Prime Minister drive something like that? That might be one avenue for something like that. I think the Home Minister chairs such a meeting. Niti Aayog should have been putting out policy briefs on how SFC should function. But we don't see much of that. I think there is the political realities of the country don't let that happen. Even when good things happen, states don't emulate other states for political reasons. That's unfortunate, but that's the reality.
Okay, and coming to another observation that Dr. Mercy had, that again the appointments are not necessarily based on maybe specialization appointments to the SFCs, and again Mr. Srinivas also echoed some of these things, that at Union Finance Commission level you know who are the people who are part of it. Maybe at the State Finance Commission level you don't have it. Now, what explains this thing, right? The kind of appointments. I mean, I'm assuming that the appointments in all states are not as good as Mr. Vikram said, that in some cases Tamil Nadu might be an exception, but in most places it might not be the case. Is it because that power asymmetry that exists that we just discussed, that the local bodies are not as powerful, they're dissipated, or is it just the issue of lack of autonomy of the State Finance Commission? What explains the kind of appointments that you have? Dr. Mercy or anyone wants to take it up?
So I think it is just like what Srinivas had said, that it is the political economy has got to do with this. The state government is the one which is constituting, and the State Finance Commission also reports to the state government, the chief minister. So they want their own ways to be the guiding factor for the State Finance Commission, and they want their own concepts and perspectives to be coming out of the recommendation reports as well. So because there is less of autonomy given to the State Finance Commission, the appointments are also not very open, and the composition is not so diverse and vast. So the state government wants to control it, doesn't want to give those autonomy to come out with radical changes and recommendations of those sorts, wants everything to be in the in a controlled manner, to be delegated. So actually it is delegated. It doesn't have autonomous powers, and the state government doesn't want to give that autonomy. So that is why I think the composition has this deficiency.
Okay. Yeah, so moving from the states to the union part, right? In fact, some of the points we have already touched upon. One thing that I wanted to again pick your brains on. So cities are the engines of growth. This is something that we have been talking about, and they are the major generator of public finances. Most of the broad, buoyant taxes, they are with the union government right now. And when it comes to union and states, we have some mechanism, right? The Union Finance Commission decides how the union taxes will be shared with the states, right? There is this vertical gap, and there are ways by which it can be shared. But there is no such arrangement between union and the cities, despite cities contributing a significant pool of public finances, right? Income tax collections or corporate tax connections. Cities play a very significant role over there. In fact, if cities prosper, cities develop, these kind of tax collection will be better, and this will be good for the overall economy, right? It can be beneficial for the rural areas as well, areas which are beyond the cities. Now, is it worth considering, or should the union finance consider that the union government share a part of its tax pool with the urban local bodies? And this is something which the 13th Finance Commission had also observed, but yeah, it did not recommend something like that. But do you think it makes sense? Again, Mr. Vikram, then Dr. Mercy, and Mr. Srinivas.
So it's eminently possible, although the constitution does, kind of, and will have to be amended suitably
for that.
for that to allow the Central Finance Commission to pass an award. But I think you can rest assured that this will be opposed tooth and nail by the states, because they don't want any, as it is, there is a fight, going on the devolution to states, and the entire debate that's going on. And if out of that pie you were to take out some portion and pass it on, states will kind of raise the ante and say that their powers are being diluted, and the center is trying to directly deal with the local bodies, bypassing sovereign state governments. So it's tricky. It's a political issue. It's possible you can amend the constitution to allow for that. Just to give you a parallel context, I believe that in the United States, the equivalent of our income tax, it actually through a such a kind of a devolution formula, it actually goes to all the 3 tiers, including the city governments. In fact, if you see your the way the devolution happens, if you pay your income tax itself, it kind of mentions how much of it will go to the center, to the federal government, how much to the state, and how much to the the city, the local body there. So their constitution or their law allows this kind of devolution. In India, it's a political minefield if you start talking of these things, and especially when you separately have a state finance commission that is responsible for kind of devolving funds of the state to the local bodies. Then to have a similar provision for the Central Finance Commission, I think will be opposed by the states.
So again, if I add one point here, like you're not saying that whatever 41% is being devolved to the states, you reduce that 41% to something else, right? 41% goes to the state, and again, the devolution to the urban local bodies is separate. It's not necessarily part of that. Is that something which is feasible?
See, again, this issue is, first of all, the center has to agree to, devolving funds from out of its share without affecting the state's share from its own share. The center also has its own commitments, and I don't think any finance minister would be very happy to see that go away. At the same time, it's also this issue about this center trying to encroach upon the state's powers. Today, the states feel that they are responsible for the proper, functioning of local bodies. They can pass laws. It will be seen as an encroachment into, the powers of states. It will get into that complication that how come you are directly passing funds from the center directly to the local bodies. So it can become politically, an issue.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Kapur. Dr. Mercy?
So, Sarthak, as Vikramji had said, that is very right, that constitutionally it has to be approved. But we have visited many different types of cities. Like our academic curriculum is designed that way that every semester we have to take our students and study one city in detail. So we study different types of cities, like type A, type B, type C, D, different types of cities, class 1, class 2, class 3 types of. So, most of the cities bearing the big municipal corporations, most of the cities, like I'll take an example of Swachh Bharat. So most of the cities have utilized the funds which have been given to them under Swachh Bharat mission and for Smart City mission also, to purchase equipments. So they have the tipper vans, right? They have the tractors, and they have all of those things. And ironically, all of them are lying idle in the municipality building. It is not being used. Those are getting rusted. we also went and visited in one of the city. We went and visited the MRF center, Material Recovery Facility. State of the art MRF created, right? Even to the extent that you can do sorting for textile waste, right? Lying idle, not being used. So when we asked them that what is the problem, so they said ki, we don't have manpower, who is going to use this? यो फंड आया और उससे हमने ये सब बना तो दिया, बट ये चलाने के लिए आदमी नहीं है. और जब आदमी नहीं है तो जैसे तैसे थोड़ा बहुत, and the whole city is looking like a dustbin. But the resources are, well furnished resources, rich resources, but they are not utilized because the municipality doesn't have staff or they don't have the willingness to do it. Nobody is questioning. The civic participation is not there. Even though you can see that the city is just looking like a dustbin, people are still happy with that. हाँ ठीक है, सब अच्छा है, सब बराबर है, ऐसा कोई complaint नहीं है. When we surveyed the citizens, this is what was coming out. So my sum and substance of bringing this up is that even if the union government say, we neutralize all other impediments, even if the union government devolves and gives some funds to municipalities, they won't be able to use it the way they want or the way it should be used. They might create a resource, they might create infrastructure, they might buy for capital expenditure, they might do it, but the operating capacities are seriously missing. They don't have that level of professionals and intellect to actually design PPPs or contracts, hire agencies, keep a monitoring tab on them and then see that the work is happening and all. So even if it is being done, bearing few big cities, bearing few bigger municipal corporations like the Ahmedabad, Chennai or the Bangalore, the other cities are really in a very bad shape. Few of them also told me that आप मैम ऐसा बोलते हो कि हम लोग काम नहीं करते. आपको पता है हमको पगार 3 महीने बाद आता है. हमको हर महीने पगार भी नहीं मिलता है, 3 महीने बाद इकट्ठा पगार आता है. So how do we sustain ourselves? So there was no motivation absolutely amongst the employees also. So the state of professionals which are involved in the municipalities is very poor. There is no motivation and they don't have the kinds of capacities. So it is very difficult that if we give them funds, we assume that it will be utilized the way it should be utilized. That's my take on
Okay.
this.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Mercy. Mr. Srinivas?
Yeah, a couple of things come to my mind. I completely agree with all the points made by Mr. Vikram and Dr. Mercy. The root of the issue is again, who has the incentive to see the urban local bodies do well, right? What is the political incentive? If I am the political executive, what is the incentive for me to grant more funds to it? And this is where everything fails, because if Bengaluru, let's say Bengaluru's quality of life or Ahmedabad's quality of life or Chennai's quality of life is horrible. People are complaining day in and day out. There is mosquitoes, there is potholes, all the things that we keep hearing about. Right now in our country, we have a seasonal cycle. There is a flooding season, followed by pothole season, followed by extreme heat season, followed by pollution season, depending on which city you are. Pretty much all cities go through this cycle. You see floods in Ahmedabad, you see floods in Chennai, and now in Kerala, whatever happened, and so on. Yet no party loses power as a result of it. The problems of urban citizens do not lead to any political change, because what are you going to do if you're not happy with the conditions of your city? How are you going to deliver your anger or your opinion at the ballot box? There is no option for that, because the state government is formed differently. The CM might be an MLA from some other part of the state, has nothing to do with it. The development ministers, urban ministers, all of that, right? So as long as the people that are politically accountable are not locally elected, you are going to have this problem, right? Therefore, expecting union government to do something would be completely illogical. If union government does something for the sake of cities or rural, it is only to get some brownie points or some, pat on the back saying, hey, we did that. And actually, we don't want them to do much. It will be a political landmine if union government were to transfer funds to cities like Mr. Vikram said, and we should take him a lot more seriously than someone like me, because the funds need to come to states, and states get to decide how the funds go, whether to cities or rural or something else. It is a business of the states. So the systems at the state need to be worried about. Yet at a union level too, there are some things that can be done. Take the case of tax on petrol, Sarthak. In every liter of petrol or diesel that anyone purchases, and this is one of the highest revenue sources of union government and state government, right? Everyone agrees. It doesn't come under GST. It has a tax, it has a cess, it has so many things, which means that the governments at both union level and state level are leveraging the purchasing power of the citizens in urban centers every time they go to a petrol pump. But when that same vehicle, the two-wheeler or car, leaves the petrol bunk and comes on the streets, what are they going to do? They're going to use the roads maintained by the municipal corporation, which are not getting any share of the taxes they just paid on the liter of petrol. So you are collecting taxes on something that everyone uses, particularly in cities, one of the biggest revenue sources, and yet the city government that is supposed to provide services for the motorists does not get any share of that. Now that's a huge anomaly, if you ask me, right? So that needs to be fixed. Why can't 1 rupee of every liter go to the municipal corporation? Okay, this kind of thing may not require a constitutional amendment. I could be wrong, but this may not require a constitutional amendment. It requires a political will and wanting to do that. And instead, what happens now is the grants, right? We have a certain budget for a Chennai or a Bengaluru, but then the state government gives a grant, and nobody knows when the grant is given, based on what reason, and whether it will be coming regularly, will it be given one, or based on bills, or will it be over? So there is no predictable schedule of the funds from transfer from state government to local bodies or urban government. So therefore, the urban government cannot plan for anything big. So they need to depend on that last minute. And in cities like Bengaluru, it is very common knowledge. The road has been laid, contractor not paid. 600 crores pending bills. I'm sure we hear that in all cities, right? So these things need to be cleaned up at a fundamental level. I would say that the model of Mumbai should be a role model for other cities of India. Mumbai city, the governance model of Mumbai city, we don't need to go to London or New York or any other developed countries, all that. All we need to do is look at Mumbai. What does Mumbai do? Mumbai gets a share of GST. Mumbai had the octroi tax, now it's getting a share of GST. Mumbai runs the bus, it runs the electricity, it runs all the civic services. Therefore, there is a much greater accountability of the municipal corporation to the citizens. The annual budget of Mumbai is 6 times that of the Bengaluru annual budget. Mumbai is bigger city, sure, but not that much bigger or 6 times bigger than Bengaluru, right? So we need to understand how to bring these things together at a state level, and trying to expect union government to share funds with the municipal thing would be, I think it's impractical at this point of time. And if it happens, like Mr. Vikram said, it will lead to a huge uproar from the state governments. The state governments, unfortunately, are neither doing the right thing or not letting the right thing happen. And this is a serious problem that we need introspection from.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Srinivas. So again,
Mr. Vikram wants to come in.
Yeah, Mr. Vikram, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. A quick interjection. I just want to clarify for those who are not fully informed. What we are talking about is, devolution from, the center to local bodies. But in the CFC, already there is a provision for state-specific grants and grants to local bodies. So we need not confuse with that. Already grants to local bodies, some are tied, some are untied, and based on performance. Incidentally, one of the the conditionalities is that the SFCs should have been constituted. And reports given, I think by 2024 or something, they should have done it to be eligible for the grants. So it's not that the Center Finance Commission does not give the funds to the local bodies, but it's a very, very small portion. If you actually divide it and actually see the amount that every local body gets, it's a very small portion of its total revenues. But still it is there. I just wanted to clarify, we are not talking about those grants, because what we are talking of is the devolution, which is basically their net revenues. Out of that, what percentage should go to the states and how much to local bodies? So that will be a politically very difficult decision. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Vikram. Now, since we were talking about grants, I think it is a nice segue to talk about grants, or rather the dependence on grants. So what we have observed is over the years, there is an increasing role of grants. If you look at a municipal body's revenue pool, the dependence on grants has been on the rise, which implies that their own source of revenue, it can be tax revenue, it can be non-tax revenue, user charges and all, that now constitutes a smaller portion as compared to what it was in the past maybe. And if you think of autonomy of any urban local body, you cannot be autonomous if you are dependent on the other levels of government, on the union government or the state government, because they will also have their own priorities. So what can be done here, or what needs to be done, so that there can be a switch from the current setup to a setup where ULBs prioritize again getting their own sources of revenue, where they move towards maybe self-reliance, gradually move towards generating their own tax revenue, levy more user charges. And again, we have seen that in many places, the urban local bodies are not levying user charges. In case they are levying user charges, it is not, the rates are not periodically revised. So what are the incentives right now? What can be done to change this, to move to a situation where urban local bodies actually charge for things that they are providing for and generate more sources of revenue? Yeah. So again, I'll go to Mr. Srinivas this time, and then Mr. Vikram, and then Dr. Mercy.
How to make the grants? Can you repeat the final?
How to reduce the dependence on grants? How can urban local bodies prioritize generating their own sources of revenue?
Yeah, so the powers given to generate source of revenue to urban local bodies are limited, right? First of all, right? If you go to a restaurant in San Francisco and you pay tax on your restaurant bill, almost all of it goes to San Francisco City Council and then San Francisco Transit. If you go do that in a restaurant in Mumbai or Chennai or wherever, that money will go to the government of Tamil Nadu and government of India. There you go. So where are they going to raise the revenues from? And so what municipal corporations are doing, which I'm not very happy about, is trying to apply things like user charges for waste management, user charges for this. If you're already collecting, property taxes, you're already collecting land charges, you're already, why are you levying more and more user charges? What is the purpose of collecting property taxes, if not for providing services to their property? So because they're so squeezed and not able to generate any revenues, they're trying to look for loopholes and other ways of doing that. There is a professional tax, there is advertising tax, there is parking tax. I'm all for cities leveraging all these available sources of revenue and getting them. But the larger question is the biggest question. Cities are generating tons of taxes for both union and state, and yet they are dry. They don't have money. How can that be? If you are the economy, you are the engine of the economy, you are creating jobs, you are making all the life easy for all the people that are submitting the taxes, paying the taxes, all the restaurants that are paying taxes, all the companies that are paying corporate taxes, and yet the city is the first one to be blamed, right? The corporate class will say the city is not doing proper infrastructure. The employees will say the roads are so bad because we are paying so much taxes. Recently, there's so much of outcry about taxpayers and all of that. And yet, nobody really knows that very little of that tax actually goes to the entity that provides them these basic services. So therefore, grants. What I would say on the grant is that if the SFC works, there is no need for grant, right? Would you agree with that, Sarthak? If the SFC works perfectly, there is no need for grant. The number of discretionary grants should be very minimal. Even today, the union government has some discretionary grants, as you could see in the last budget, but more or less, it's no longer discretionary, right? It is based on a formula and based on a yearly schedule and all of that. So I would say that fix the SFC, so eliminate grants or make grants as a discretionary thing when there is a natural calamity or a special purpose project. Let's say you are holding Olympics in Chennai. Now state government can pump in give a big grant to make Chennai, a world-class sporting city or whatever. Otherwise, why do you need grant to make a road or to fix a stormwater drain? That doesn't make any sense to me. If you do grants, at least make them come on a fixed schedule and tie the outcome with it. This grant is ring-fenced for this purpose. Don't give grant as if you're giving charity, as if you're being some nice person and giving money to somebody. It's their money. It's the city's money that went to you. It is need to come back to them. So don't make it like, a punishment, but make it a, a pleasurable experience and make it happen on a cadence. Every 6 months, this much funds will come in from the state treasury into the city accounting system. That's how it should be done in my opinion.
Yeah, Mr. Vikram.
Okay, so just to build on what Mr. Srinivas mentioned, see, of late, for example, in Tamil Nadu, particularly Chennai, we have seen property taxes having been steeply raised, and recently the professional tax was also thought to be substantially increased. These are principally the two main source of own taxes. Of course, of this, the property tax is the bigger thing. But from the citizens' perspective, they already have been seeing, like in the tariff increase in electricity, for example, which happened after the current government came. Again, they have seen prices go up in so many other things. So from the citizens' perspective, there is a limit to how much a citizen can absorb in terms of taxes. The citizen is not really concerned whether that tax ultimately goes to the center or state or to the local body. Most of the people are not even aware, of this the sharing formula, how much is collected, by whom, and how much is assigned to whom. Very few people actually know or care about. What they care about is that how much tax overall am I paying. That's a classical thing that's going around, on the social media, that I earn 100 rupees, of which 30 rupees is taken by income tax. Out of 70, if I buy some service or a good or something, this much 18% goes to GST, and this much after that I am having hardly about 50 rupees or something, and then I am having to pay these taxes and all. So people are kind of getting the feeling that they are overtaxed, and not really knowing that this tax, most of it doesn't go to the local body who are supposed to provide the services. So the moment the local body says, okay, hey, I have not raised the property tax for so many years, and I'm going to now go in for a higher tax, people then go hammer and tongs at the local body. So I really feel bad for the local body, because they really are actually at the receiving end. Having said that, I think we must also realize that the law does allow the local bodies to periodically revise their property tax. Technically, they don't need anybody's permission. The council can pass a resolution and do it. But in reality, we all know that they will not do it without a green signal from the state government. So informally, they will be told not to increase it. In fact, Chennai, I remember, for 20 years, the property tax was not raised, and on paper, you don't need permission. But in reality, whichever government is in power will not, kind of give you the green signal to go ahead with it because of political considerations. And therefore, you have a situation where, your own tax revenue is, the share is progressively going down. But then to restore balance, you cannot overnight, double your property tax rates and all. It was tried, but then, it was then reduced and all. So it's very complex, when you leave the decision to the political economy, as they say, to decide this. On the other hand, you have cases of the power sector, for example, where you have the regulatory commissions, who are mandated to fix the tariffs on an annual basis. I think there is perhaps a high time for such a kind of a regulatory agency for the service providers, like the urban local bodies, or in some cities like you have the water boards, like Chennai Metro Water, which again suffers from the same problem. The moment they try to increase their tariff or the per month connection charges, there is always this problem of the state telling them not to. But if you have an independent regulator yes, there is a possibility that periodic revision will happen to allow for inflation and allow for full recovery of costs. And the advantage of having a regulator is that you will actually do a detailed analysis of the actual cost involved in providing those services. And if it can be done, say, for the power sector or for the water sector, it can be done even for normal municipal services. So it need not be, dependent on some rule of the thumb or based on unscientific criteria. I've always said that, maybe there is a high time that, the urban sector to begin with, the urban local bodies, their costs should be actually very transparently worked out by an independent regulator to actually arrive at what should be their actual, the revenues that should meet that cost of providing those services. And having arrived at that number, then what are the sources from which, that money will be generated, whether through transfers from the union and state, or whether it is from own tax revenue or other user fees, etc. I think the state finance commissions have never done this exercise of actually arriving at the normative cost and then doing backward, to find out how much should actually they be. What they do is, okay, what is the pie available? What is the kitty available? From there, how I will devolve. So if this year, let's say, funds available are limited, so it's the problem of the local bodies. No, it's not correct. If I think you can justify that, no, the city requires this much of funds, they should boldly be able to, give a recommendation that you have to increase taxes by this much, or the, the devolution has to increase from this percentage to this percentage, because without that, you will not provide optimal services. Now, problem is, unfortunately, these SFCs, like a lot of regulators, there is a capture. Like the word is used is regulatory capture. Likewise, the SFCs also are, they dare not kind of give a recommendation which will put the state governments into trouble. So I think the whole issue comes down ultimately that states have to give autonomy not just to local bodies, but to regulatory agencies and state finance commissions and all to do their job. If we can do it properly and in a transparent manner, I personally believe that the citizen is willing to pay. But then, of course, it should be matched by performance in terms of good services. But the first starting point is to tell the citizen why we are increasing the tariffs, why we are increasing the tax rates, and how that money is working for you. So once that is done in a transparent manner, I think the willingness to pay will be better and you can increase your own taxes.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Kapur. Dr. Mercy, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very difficult question, that how to nudge the urban local bodies to prioritize their own revenues, because there had been a legacy of dependency and now they are so attuned to dependency that, shifting gears and getting autonomous is something that they would also like to resist. So, and if we look at the current state, bearing the big cities, we have gone to cities wherein the property tax collection is only 13%. And that 13% also happens how that the poor municipal officials, they are on the field, they go and knock each door asking for property tax, and people make them come once, twice, thrice, and then they have some quarrels, and after that they give the property tax. So if we take big cities as outliers who are doing well in their own revenue generation, the other cities are not doing that. They are not in a position to generate even the amount of property tax that they could legitimately collect. That is one thing. The second thing is that we did a study very recently on the leakages of revenue leakages that the cities have. And incidentally, we found that the way property tax is designed, the formula with which that they are collecting the property tax, the exemptions that they are providing are leading to bigger leakages in the revenue of the city government. So if we follow whatever formula we are following for property tax collection, many cities that we have studied, we studied around 100 cities, each of them, they have a second layer of formula which says that if with the prescribed formula, there are 3 formulas. So if one of the formulas they have taken, and if with that prescribed formula, if the property tax is coming to be 100 rupees. So they say that 20% of 100 is the property tax. So only 20 rupees has to be charged as property tax. So even the formula for property tax is not being used the way the formula is designed. There is a second layer to the assessment, which is a big leakage in the revenue generation itself. So having said this, the level of, so they are not actually motivated to, generate their own revenues, because they know that from somewhere the funds will come and we'll be able to do it. That is the legacy that they are carrying forward. So one of the things that just came to my mind is that what if the state government devolves whatever devolution they have to give to the city government, but what if the center does a matching grant to the own revenues? So first, assess the revenue potential of the city. Ask the cities to assess their own revenue potential, that how much they could generate out of different categories of user charges or property tax or advertising fee or professional tax or whatever. So what is the revenue potential that the city has, and we will make a matching grant. So if a concept like a matching grant to own revenue comes up, maybe the cities would get nudged to increase the size of their own revenues and match up to that kind of a funding from the central government. So that is something which I think can work out.
Yeah, thanks. That's an interesting proposal. Let's see how this can be fructified. Now, I have just a couple of questions. One question, and then we can open it up for discussion. Open the house for discussion. Now, one thing that, again, if you look at the municipal finances, we will notice is municipal borrowings is not something that has not taken up in the Indian context. Municipal borrowings as a proportion of GDP is somewhere around 0.05% or something like that. It's minuscule. Now, again, if we are not borrowing, it again might impact capital expenditure, long-term infrastructure projects. And as we have been saying, we need better infrastructure in cities. And most of the cities they will focus on just the current expenditure, right? They're trying to meet the current expenditure. So what is the reason, right? Why municipal borrowings have not been prioritized? Do we need any municipal borrowing framework, or what is required to get that done? And again, if you disagree that, okay, municipal borrowing is not significant, then you can also raise that as well. So again, Mr. Srinivas, then Mr. Kapur, then Dr. Mercy.
I'm probably not the right person to give an intelligent answer on this. All I want to say is that the cities are sitting on huge assets, like public buildings, land, so on and so forth. In one of the webinars I've conducted with the outgoing corporators of Bengaluru, the municipal councillors of Bengaluru, 18 of them were on that call, and across all parties, and they said that BBMP, the Municipal Corporation of Bengaluru, is sitting on assets worth 50,000 crores. Market building, shopping complexes, so on and so forth. And we are not able to leverage that. So there is an understanding of that, but there is hardly anything we could do about it. And that, again, the root cause is that it's the behavior of the state government that looks at the municipalities as children that cannot walk or run, but we need to kind of protect them. We can't let them do things, big things. This is the prevailing attitude. I think that needs to change. But I agree with your hypothesis that cities needs to borrow more to do more capital expenditure. That is slam dunk. That's clearly something that needs to be done. How and why, I'm not qualified to respond.
Okay, yeah. Mr. Kapur, do you want to add something here?
Okay, so I just want to clarify that, taking over from Mr. Srinivas, first of all, not all cities are endowed with so much of assets. Like Chennai, for example, doesn't have too much of land, which they own, or at least, land that can be spared. Whatever assets they have in terms of buildings, for example, or infrastructure is not something that can be encashed. I mean, the moment you go to market trying to sell the family silver, there are huge issues. So, for example, I may be having, a health center in a prime location in the city. Do you think any government would permit me to, sell that to raise money or even, mortgage it? So these are not really leverageable, although their market value may be in thousands of crores. That's one. Second, having worked as the CEO of the Tamil Nadu Urban Development Fund, I want to mention that, there is a serious capacity problem in urban local bodies. Even the best of cities, don't have people who understand, how these financial markets work. It's very easy to say that, you should raise and float bonds and raise money and all. I mean, if you see the quality of our finance managers who are there in our towns and cities, I mean, it's a great thing even if they can write proper accounts. Forget about, understanding financial markets and how, bonds work. See, in countries like the US, they have very, very sophisticated markets. In fact, the municipal bonds, I think, are the fourth largest, financial instruments available, and public freely, kind of subscribe to them. Huge pension funds, they subscribe to them. Provident funds subscribe to them, and there's one of the main sources of capex by local bodies is what are called munis, MUNIS, municipal bonds. And unfortunately, in India, this idea has been floating around for several decades, and unfortunately, it's not gone beyond a couple of states like Tamil Nadu and Kerala and Karnataka, and maybe this our Gujarat to some extent. But then, if you see the landscape, I mean, practically it's in ruins. This huge, municipal, this opportunity of developing a municipal debt market has actually been lost. Sometime a decade or two ago, I think Government of India tried to start something called the Pooled Finance Development Fund and all, under JNNURM. But they ensured that it was stillborn because the JNNURM funds actually elbowed out and killed that market. So when cheap grants are available, at 75% or 90% and all, who will borrow? I'd rather take a grant rather than borrow from the market. So first of all, that seriousness is not there. There has been no market building. A lot of investors are totally unaware of the capacity or the potential of municipalities to raise finance. See, the old concept of any kind of debt financing is that you should be in a position to repay the debt. You try to convince an investor that his or her money is safe. They feel that the way the municipal finances are, when they have serious doubt whether their money is safe or not, which is why we have these intermediaries like the Tamil Nadu Urban Development Fund, and similarly in Karnataka we have an Urban Development Fund. The idea is this intermediation de-risks this. So if, let's say, it's downward to float a bond, it may not attract investors. But if a financial intermediary like the Urban Development Fund floats it with all the various, the safeguards and etc., you structure the bond in such a manner that it becomes saleable, it becomes marketable, and therefore you de-risk it. And sometimes the rating agencies will rate it very high, which will secure the investors' money. So it's a sophisticated kind of an instrument, which not many people unfortunately understand. Recently, I believe the SEBI has now taken the initiative. In fact, in Chennai, recently there has been a seminar on this, and they are trying their best to now reintroduce it. But there are a lot of issues on municipal bonds which need to be ironed out at the central and state level before we take it to the local bodies. Having said that, what I would like to also say is that as a principle, it needs to be impressed upon local bodies that debt financing is one of the most, I would say, efficient ways to finance, creation of assets. Because see, when you borrow money, you need to repay it. And in order to repay, you need to maintain the asset. Especially if it is an asset that gives you revenue, you need to maintain it. So you need to provide a maintenance budget to it. You need to have staff to maintain it. You will also, while procuring the asset, ensure that it is a good quality asset so that it will last. So therefore, it brings a discipline, which today is lacking in a lot of public financed projects. So if you get free money, like a grant, you don't bother if the road, gets washed away in the next rains. But if you are responsible for repaying that money 5 years, 10 years down the line, you will ensure that, the asset is well, built and well maintained. So that's a simple logic of debt financing. Debt financing brings in some kind of a prudence, some kind of a discipline, which is lacking in our local bodies. And Unfortunately, there is a belief in most local bodies, among officials and public representatives, that borrowing is bad. It's not. The whole world borrows. I mean, every state borrows. The union government borrows. Everyone leverages, future revenues. So that is the principle. But somehow local bodies feel that they have to only, cut the cloth according to the size. So if let's say this year I don't have money, I will defer a particular project, which ultimately affects the quality of civic services. So therefore, we are in a situation where practically no, capital works are being carried out in most towns and cities, and they all keep depending on that, morsel or something which is thrown at them by the state or the center in order to take up a particular project. In fact, the common joke, used to be when I was a municipal commissioner, see, they will not maintain a road because maintenance means money. That money has to come out from your operations budget. So once you lay a road, they'll stop maintaining it and wait for it to go down completely. After 3-4 years, when it is completely gone, they will put a proposal for it as a capex proposal, so that then they'll use some grant money and all to do it. So, but they could have actually, maintained it and allowed the asset to run for 8 or 10 years by some minor this thing. For that, they will not provide any money. It's rather that go for a new asset every time. So this is a very sad story that's happening. I personally am a great believer in, promoting municipal debt financing, but I think it requires a separate seminar for this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Kapur, for the elaborate explanation for it. And we have like some 10 minutes left. So the last part, I would want you to, if you have to recommend some low-hanging fruits, right? Maybe 3 most important reforms that needs to be done at the institutional level, what it would be. I'll go to first Mr. Kapur, and I think Mr. Kapur, you had some slides. Do you want to show the slides, or you want to just talk about it? So it will be helpful. And then I'll go to Dr. Mercy. 3 most basic things, or the first things that we need to get things done, and then to Mr. Srinivas. Mr. Kapur?
Yeah, so I because for paucity of time, I won't go through the slideshow, but I'll summarize what I wanted to convey for the seminar. So first and foremost is, there is a lot of talk about institutional reform. I think the elephant in the room is that and I think somebody mentioned in the beginning, our municipal bodies are not governments, self-government institutions. They are just municipalities. They are virtually like an arm of the state government, meant to perform certain functions. So when you talk of a city government, you need to empower it with functions. So if you look at the Schedule 12 of the Indian Constitution, out of 18 functions or matters that have been listed, I did an exercise. I wanted to share that slide, but we'll leave it for the time being. Not even half of those, 18 are actually, at least in our state, been devolved to the local bodies. Maybe the number may vary from state to state, but most of these functions, important ones like land use planning, economic and social planning, which are supposed to be done by local bodies, are not within their domain. It is all being done by the state government. So your point is that you have to make empowered cities. And I know it can't be done across the board all of a sudden. What we could try is to push for at least the major cities, the 4, 5, 6 major metropolitan cities. I think it's high time to do a pilot to make them actually, self-governed cities, which means all the functions of various state agencies which are happening in that city must be transferred under the control of the mayor and council. That's the point. And of course, there are details to it. How does it work and all? I have some radical thoughts on that, but I'll leave it for the time being. But then I think some bold decision has been to be taken where you have to empower, at least a few major cities to try out this experiment and see that they really function like the city of London or a city of New York and all, make them really a government. Second, the SFC itself has to be reformed. See, SFCs only go by terms and conditions given by the state government. As I was mentioning a bit earlier, you have to make a proper analysis of the actual expenditures incurred by the municipality or the city to provide the optimum level of services. There could be benchmark of, okay, garbage has to be removed 100%, segregation has to be done, or let's say water supply this much level. You can actually put cost to it, and you can then work backwards and say how much is the revenue required, and therefore based on that the recommendations should flow. That exercise, to my knowledge, has never been done by SFCs. These are typically done by regulatory agencies. So either make the SFC as a de facto regulator, who should not just be asked to come out with reports once in 5 years, but annually, there should be, or if the SFC can't do it, set up a separate urban regulator to do this job of fixing, the charges, fixing the taxes, because then at least you de-risk them from the political this thing. And the third and final thing I would like to say is you need to set up in every state, an urban finance intermediary like we have in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, and build a municipal bond market, which will actually help, these local bodies to go to market, to improve their, carry out their reforms, improve their finances, and then attract, market capital into this space. So I'll leave at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Kapur. Dr. Mercy, what are your 3 points, most important points?
So Sarthak, one is like giving more autonomy to the State Finance Commission, constituting the State Finance Commission, and bringing out those reports quite often, deliberating on those reports, and abiding by the guidelines and the recommendations. So genuinely and very seriously take into consideration the State Finance Commissions. That is one very important thing. The second thing is that develop the capacities at the grassroots level, that is the local body, develop the capacities amongst the professionals, bring professionalism in municipal management, bring a concept of incentivizing service delivery. So if there are municipal employees who are working very hard, how do you incentivize their work? If some city is getting an award for Swachh Sarvekshan, definitely it is a bond between the citizens and the municipal employees, because of which that city is achieving that accolade. So what is it that the employees have got for it? Because otherwise they go in very different directions which are not very suitable for municipal governance. So have a culture of professionalism and incentivizing with variable pays and those kinds of mechanisms. Introducing those administrative changes and reforms is very much required. How do you hire? How do you conduct the training programs for them? Because I have seen that most of the training programs are very compliance based. It is there in the mission and it has to be done. So it is tokenism, it is checkbox syndrome, but do very serious training programs for building up the skills, because with the increasing pace of urbanization and the complexities that climate change is throwing to cities, lot of innovative mechanisms need to be at the hands of the municipal staff to combat these and bring the city to a normal level again. So those kinds of training programs and capacity building and recruitments and incentivizing is an administrative reform, and it needs to happen because good talent is not very willing to go in and work into the municipal corporation, because the pay packages are very low, and then there is a lot of the boss syndrome, and there is so ultimately they follow the last line which is written in the job description, that whatever your boss says, the remaining elements of the job description is completely forgotten. So whatever the boss will say, they will do that. They will not apply their mind. So they will put their minds at home and then come to the municipality and work. So we have seen, are invited many retired municipal employees to come and give lectures in our studios and classes. So, Sarthak, they said कि अब बहुत हो गया, अब हमको कोई lecture नहीं देना है, ठीक है, अब जो इंचार्ज है ड्यूटी में आप उसको बुलाइए और वो लेक्चर देंगे. We don't want to share our experience. So, what is behind the scene, that the guy is terribly tired and fed up, So with the kind of culture that was prevailing in terms of the job, there was no motivation for them, and they are happy now. They don't want to talk about it even, right? So those kinds of administrative reforms are a big thing that needs to happen for municipal management. Because if the monies are going to come in the way we are talking, and supposedly it happens with a magical wand, then what happens? Will they be able to execute it? So that is one thing. And the third thing is that strengthening own sources of revenue by way of matching grants from the central government. So that will nudge them in
Yeah.
a big way to strengthen their own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mercy. Mr. Srinivas?
I'll keep it really short. My first top 10 points are the first point of Mr. Vikram, which is empowered city governments. Until and unless you empower the city governments and call them city governments and make the mayor executive in charge of the city, like you have a PM and a CM, the mayor should be the political leader of the city. Till now, we haven't seen that in this country, and that needs to happen. It is a dream for many of us, and we don't know whether it will happen in our lifetime, but that is what we should be working towards. So perhaps India Habitat Foundation and others in this field can work on such a campaign or a communications awareness building around that. Most people don't even know that there's a third tier of government. If you ask people who is your prime minister, a lot of people will know. Who is the chief minister? Most of them will know that too. But if you ask who is the mayor, less than 5% of the people know who the mayor of the city is. So that's a very sad state of affairs. So that's where it all begins. Number two, it is about the human resources capabilities of the municipal corporations. Compared to any other cities, in the world, the number of people working in our municipal corporations are very low. If there are 100 government employees in India, 30 of them work in the union government, 65 of them work in the state government, and 10 of them work in the local government. This needs to change. It should be the reverse. There should be more people working in third tier of governance than in the top tier of government. Why do we have so much government employees at those tiers where they are not directly providing any services to the citizens? It's a completely a messed up situation that we need to fix. I don't know how to do that, but we need to build awareness in our legislators, in our MPs and MLAs, so they can go fight for it in the cities. That's another thing I want to say. Another low-hanging fruit. Nothing is low-hanging, but relatively speaking, when somebody registers a piece of land, all stamp duty fee goes to the state government. When somebody buys a vehicle, that new vehicle lifetime tax goes to the state government. A portion of that should come to the urban local body. If somebody is buying a Honda two-wheeler in Madurai, the Madurai City Corporation should get a small percentage of that lifetime tax of that vehicle. Because after all, the Madurai Corporation is going to create the roads and the parking and all of that for that vehicle. So this should be done immediately. The GST, there's a lot of discussion about GST. Hope it comes up in the GST Council. And when someone eats in a restaurant, that fund, that tax portion of the tax belongs to the city. Who is picking up the garbage of the restaurant? It's not the state government. It's not the central government. The municipal corporation is taking care of all the waste generated by the restaurant. So therefore, it deserves some portion of the tax generated from the restaurant. So these are the things that are relatively, and of course, the mother of all, the fuel, Sarthak. If there is a small percentage of the fuel that comes in, I don't think we need any SFC after that, because that's enough to fund a lot of capital projects for, don't take me too seriously. We still need SFC and all that. But if we get a small portion of fuel tax to the cities, it will really empower the cities financially. I'll end there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Srinivas. In fact, thanks to all the panelists for such a detailed discussion, engaged discussion. Again, I will just hand it over to Mr. Kirti for his closing thoughts.
No, thank you thank you very much.
No closing thoughts. It's remarkably rich discussion. I still wanted to kind of do three things in 3 minutes, so possible. One is the organizational part, and I think Sarthak ji, you have not mentioned this, that one of the commitment that we made while organizing this webinar series is this, that we'll use this webinar series to produce a white paper on the subject. Idea was this, that there is a need for consolidation of the ideas. And the reason I'm mentioning it is to you that, we will come back to you, all the three of you, to request your contribution to that happening. Sarthak ji is going to edit it. But I thought I'll just pre-warn you that we're going to come back to you with a request for your additional contribution. This is number one. Number two is I have two questions. And you may consider me absolutely naive asking this question. Not now, but when he was a powerful, I used to ask this question, where does Kejriwal's power come from? Delhi is, after all, a city. And I think Kejriwal's power came for the fact that Delhi is the capital. Delhi is a state capital. It's a state. If 30 major cities of this country will become states, will they begin to have power? Would they have resources? Would they have political kind of, and would that kind of percolate down? Is the question that I often ask. No one answers this question, but I thought you people are so clever that I'll ask this question. And the last one is Srinivasan. I wanted to ask you specifically. I understand, I'm told it's the only one in the country. There's a Nirman party in Bangalore, which works exclusively in the municipal corporation. Its only agenda is that. And as a matter of fact, we did 2 or 3 webinars with them. And I was very intrigued and I was very excited by the idea that there is exclusive political parties. There's no interest in state government. There's no interest in anything else. They only want to concentrate on the city. And I wanted to ask Srinivasan sir if you know about them and what you think of the idea. But the first is, yes, I want you to say yes, that will come to you for ideas and contribution for this white paper. But second question, who could answer? Can we make 30 Delhi states and start the whole process of capacity building and empowerment of the cities? Is it possible? Is it doable? I know Delhi is not a great example, but Delhi has the format at least. Srinivasan sir, you want to answer that?
Yes, it's a landmine, so I'm trying to think how to answer that. Sir, you know the golden goose story, right? Nobody wants to let go of the golden goose, so it is not going to happen. We can
Hyderabad
have
example.
like that. It's not going to work. No political party or even citizens of the state will accept such a thing. I think that is something that it's a thought that can happen. I think the right framing of that thing is what Mr. Vikram said earlier, which is pick the biggest cities and create metropolitan governance structures around them. That is acceptable. I think that will work. If you noticed in the last 10 years, 15 years, every city has added a greater in front of it. Hyderabad Municipal Corporation became Greater Hyderabad. Chennai Corporation became Greater Chennai. Bengaluru became Bruhat Bengaluru. Mumbai became Bruhan Mumbai. So they are expanding the scope of the municipal corporation, and the rate at which they're going, the most of the state will be part of that city in few decades from now. Right? They're trying to subsume everything into that, so that the land value and all the political economy stuff. So no, they're not. Nobody is going to go for that. So I think the more practical approach is to try to reform governance at a metropolitan level, bringing empowered and make the political leadership of the city attractive. The people that are fighting to become ministers and MLAs today, they should fight to become councillors and mayors. If we can do that, then the city government will get strengthened, get the political teeth required to fight for the rights of the city. I think that's the more doable approach. Second question, I'm aware of the Nirman Party, sir. There are many of my friends. They have roots in civic activism. It's a very interesting idea to have a city-based party, an urban party. It's very early days, but I wish them well. They've been doing some good work around property tax and things like that. But because the municipal laws are entirely state-based, if a party says that I work only in the city and not in the state, how are you going to reform the governance model without engaging with the state government? That is a dilemma for them. I hope they find answers for that, and people like me are happy to work with them on that kind of questions. Thank you, sir.
I'll tell them.
So,
Vikram sir, huh?
Yes, Kirti, no, I mean, I had mentioned in my earlier this thing presentation that maybe time has come for setting up a city government. But learning from the Delhi experience, it's increasingly becoming clear that if you have two governments, at the same place, and if both of them belong to rival political parties, it becomes very difficult, as we are seeing in Delhi. If logically you apply the same thing to, let's say, any state in the country, 30 states, if you have a state government of one political dispensation and a opposition political party ruling at the city government level, again, you'll have the same friction, which you are seeing in Delhi. Ultimately, the citizens are going to be the losers. My formulation is somewhat different. It's very radical, but maybe it needs some thought before we actually jump on it. What I'm saying is, for such kind of state capital regions, if I may use the word SCR, like the NCR, what you could have is a city government structure where there are no elected councillors separately. You already have MLAs. Each big city has anything from 10 to 20 MLAs. You could have a city council comprising these MLAs. One of them could be nominated by the state government. I'm carefully using the word. It's not elected. I'm saying nominated. One of them could be nominated by the state government to be the mayor from out of them. And of course, you could always rotate them or do whatever, but it's not that it should be directly elected by the citizens, because citizens have already elected the MLAs. And as somebody was mentioning today, they're acting like de facto councillors. Even a small issue of a garbage or a street light is being handled by them. And with technology, you can do. So there is no need for you to have some 200, 300 councillors, 400 councillors and all. And then you have MLAs who are competing on the same turf. So have the councillors act as, the MLAs act as this thing. One of them can be a mayor. Let that mayor be a cabinet minister who has a say in the government. So in a way, you kind of de-link, that conflict between the state and the local body. So the local body becomes almost like a department of the government, and it actually, the mayor is like a de facto minister in the council, so that any major policy decisions can be quickly taken by the cabinet of the same political party and implemented by the city. And let that city then be answerable to the people, the council, the MLAs who constitute. Now, it's a very radical thought, but I've given it a lot of consideration, Kirtiji. And in our kind of a situation, perhaps it's worthy of consideration. And then only you can ensure that various departments, whether it's the police or the transportation or the public works department or the electricity or the social welfare, host of departments who can then the part of that department can be seconded to the city on deputation or whatever we may call, so that they're answerable only to the mayor, who incidentally is the minister. See, today we have a very peculiar situation in most states where you have a minister for urban development and you also have a mayor. So if something goes wrong, whom do the citizens blame? If there is a question in the assembly about, let's say, some local flooding or some kind of a local disease outbreak in a town, why is it that the minister for the urban development has to answer? Why should the mayor not answer in the council? Why should the question be even taken to the legislature? So you have these conflicts happening where the mayor says, look, I am directly elected or at least indirectly elected by councillors. This is my turf. Why is the minister taking my turf? And vice versa. So to avoid these conflicts, you kindly consider this, maybe some research can go into it to see where it has been tried in other parts of the world and how it works. Just to give an example, we have a sister city relationship with a city called San Antonio in US, in Texas. When I visited there, I was pleasantly surprised. At that time, the population, this is just a decade or so ago, was about 1.5 million, 15 lakh, which today may be about, say, 2 million. Not a small city by any account. There were only 15 councillors. Only 15 councillors manning the entire 15 lakh population. So it's possible that you can have lesser number of councillors, maybe the MLAs themselves, so that there is no turf war between the councillor and the MLA. And therefore you can actually come to faster decisions. There will be more accountability, single point of accountability. Secondly, let them have that freedom to choose their city managers. Today, we have in states like Tamil Nadu an administrative cadre of municipal officers, of engineers and all, but they report to the state. And from state, they keep getting transferred from one municipality to the other. They don't have any accountability to that municipality. I know it adds professionalism if you have a dedicated cadre, because then you can train them, you can deploy them, they get experience and all. But the way it works in the West is that there is accountability because the mayor can hire and fire his city managers. And that's how they ensure that, you get professionals on board and people who can actually deliver results. So it's complex, in our kind of a situation, whether that will work or not. But then the mayor has to have a bigger say in the, in the recruitment or appointment of officials, in the budgets, and in the financial and administrative powers. So this was just my broad thoughts, but it's up to you, experts like you, to develop on it further. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. All I want to do is to thank everyone. Thank you, Sarthak Saab. Thank you, Vikram ji. Thank you, Srinivas Saab. Thank you, Mercy ji, for this wonderful evening. We learn a lot. And as a matter of fact, Sarthak Saab, we have lots of material to work on. I think when we start working on the white paper. I also must thank my colleague, Dr. Bhuma Raman and Chitrakshi, who are working behind the scene to put this together. And I'm very grateful to them for the remarkable work they're doing. So thank you very much again. This was a 3-event sort of a webinar series. We're trying to kind of add 2 more. And we'll know next week in terms of how it's going. But we will certainly inform you if there is a 4th and the 5th webinar on this theme. With that, thank you very much again for this wonderful evening. And we look forward to meeting you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Vikram Saab.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mercy ji, we stay in Ahmedabad. Kabhi milte
Yeah,
hain.
we should meet. I'll call you once and then I will meet.
Yeah. There's 120 webinars almost, it's not a small thing.